Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We at JAIN have witnessed last many years, which legitimately can be termed as period of something like a roller coaster in terms of lots of achievement in different fields, be it academics, research, ranking, sports, and everywhere. But then you'll agree with me, there are times when you get overwhelmed by the sheer presence of certain people, certain extraordinary people, and it happens more so if they become partner in your journey towards achieving your vision, which, ma'am, is fostering human development through quality education, research, and entrepreneurship to significantly expedite, facilitate, and to large extent intensify the speed of the journey. At JAIN, we have always, of course, counted on our outcomes, but more so we have focused on the process of education. A renowned author, educator, and engineer, known for our groundbreaking work at the intersection of neuroscience and behavior, the co-teacher or writer of one of the largest MOOC courses in the world, Learning How to Learn, with latest number of enrollments standing at 3.853 millions. Since 2014 it was launched, and has been a distinguished professor of engineering at Oakland University, Michigan. From being a linguist who learned Russian for a year, earned her BA in Slavic language and literature, served in the US Army, including in Germany as a signal officer. And you know what she was doing at the age of 18? She was learning how to focus by throwing a live grenade. Rose to be a captain, left army for after about 7 years, did her 5-year BS engineering, served as a Russian language translator, authored the book Hair of the Dog, Tales from a Russian Trawler, attracting a comment from another captain. You know too much. It's time to kill you. We would like to know from you, ma'am, how it rhymes in Russian language. Applying the focus she learnt at the age of 18, you know what she did? She spotted her husband. Where? She spotted him at South Pole Station in Antarctica, where she worked as a radio operator for a year, married him in New Zealand no sooner they got off the ice, moved to Seattle, to Detroit, worked in Ford for a brief period, earned her MS Electrical and Computer Engineering in 1995. This was part-time because of young kids at home. PhD in Systems Engineering in 1998 from Oakland University, and joined as a professor at the same university. Widely published, from Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences to Wall Street Journal to the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal called her research as revolutionary. Winner of nearly 24 awards, including the Michigan Distinguished Professor of the Year 2018, she has authored many books, including the bestsellers such as A Mind for Numbers, inspiring millions of people across the world. Her interdisciplinary background provides a unique perspective on problem solving and critical thinking. Her work has influenced educational practices and helped learners develop effective learning habits. And the impact and positive influence of her ideas have been significant for learners worldwide, including all of us at JAIN. Ladies and gentlemen, as I thank Coursera to bring here this afternoon, I present to all Dr. Barbara Oakley, the legendary professor. Please join me in welcoming her to JAIN deemed to be University on behalf of 90,000 plus strong fraternity and as a group 180,000 people. Welcome you, ma'am. Thank you.
I think that you know me better than I do. That's probably the most comprehensive introduction I've ever had. So you've really, the thing is, we can learn how to learn in so many different ways, both through academia and through life itself. And that's why this university is so powerful. You're reaching out to the public not only academically, but through entrepreneurship. And that is a great thing for society as a whole. So, so let's just dive right in. I think that I'm not. Whoa. If we have a hand mic, that'd be great. I love to wander when I'm speaking. Yeah. Okay. So, I'd like to just begin by reiterating the words of the preeminent researcher in AI, Fei-Fei Li, who said, AI won't replace humans, but humans who use AI will replace humans that don't. So it can, if you've been an early trier of generative AI, you may be like, it's not that big a deal. It doesn't matter. But if you look at what's going on now, you see the power and also how you can use it to be more productive in your everyday life and a more effective teacher. And I'll give you some ideas along those lines. So I am from Oakland University in Michigan. So it's not in California. You can see I have a snow shovel. And the thing is that I teach that course, Learning How to Learn, with Terry Sinowski, and he's the Francis Crick professor at the Salk Institute. And this is Terry taking a break from his day job, which contrasts with my snow shovel because he does live in Southern California. And that's one of the great things about online teaching. We can reach students from very different backgrounds, but we professors can have very different backgrounds as we get together as well. So, to my shock, I was invited to speak at Harvard. I was a nervous wreck. I mean, imagine if you were invited to speak at Harvard, you'd probably be a little nervous too. And I walked in the room and I was even more nervous because it was packed, standing room only, all around the edges. And I thought, why are there so many people here? Turns out our one little course, made for virtually nothing, mostly in my basement, had on the order of the same number of students as all of Harvard's massive open online courses put together, made for millions of dollars with hundreds of people. And what this tells you is that people worldwide, learners, are starved for fresh, well-grounded, research-based information that they can practically use to both learn and be more productive in their everyday lives. Now, of course, we've created a lot of courses on Coursera, and including some on teaching. If you teach online, the online teaching course is particularly good, I think, for upskilling in your career, for learning how to learn for youth, for your children. But we're here today to talk about what does ChatGPT do? And many of you may know that it functions in part by predicting the next word in a sentence. Although good luck, predicting the next word in this sentence. Why did the koala burp politely while reciting pi to 50 places? But what it does is more sophisticated than that. There's a way internally that it relates words to one another. And if you remember, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to anthropomorphize. In other words, I'm going to talk about computers and generative AI as if it was a human, because it makes it a lot easier for me. We know it's not, but it just makes it easier. So if you think about it, 5 years ago, remember you'd go to Google Translate to translate something, and it was awful. And the reason for it was that by the time the computer's attention would get to the end of a sentence, it would forget what was at the beginning. So you can imagine it was pretty tough to do good translations that way. But using these clever word embedding technologies, we can not only connect words within sentences, but we can relate them to hundreds of thousands of other words that we either upload or that are on the web. So how did this happen? What is this? I'm going to give you a teeny tiny history lesson in generative AI. In 2017, a paper was published called Attention is All You Need. And this paper was published in the Neural Information Processing Society conference. This conference is so important that typically they might have 8,000 registration places. Within 10 minutes after that registration opens, all of those spots are filled. This tells you worldwide how important these conferences are. And you might say, Neural Information Processing Society, what is that? It is neuroscience and artificial intelligence have worked hand in hand through the decades. When neuroscience would get stuck on something, they'd go talk to artificial intelligence researchers. And when artificial intelligence researchers would get stuck, they'd go look at how does the brain really work in order to make their advances. So this paper was accepted by the Neural Information Processing Society, and nobody thought it was important at all. In fact, they stuck it off in a corner as a poster session presented by a grad student. So here we go. We got this, paper. It turns out that the concepts introduced in this paper are so important that it has been cited over 100,000 times. So what did this paper introduce? If you look, it introduced the idea of the transformer. And what do transformers do, first of all? They are creative in a way that the human brain is creative. So I'm not sure if we have sound, so I guess we'll find out if we have sound. No, we don't have sound. So I will try to give you a little sense of what you would hear if we had sound. And this is a website called Suno. I entered into it the title of the paper. Okay. Let's see. Let's make sure I've got it on right here. Okay, we do. Let's try it again. No, it's not working. No, that's actually just a. Okay. So think about it this way. I put in the title of this research paper, a little bit about transformers, the most dull and boring topic available, and it generated this wonderful song for me, very creatively, which I hope I might be able to play. We're going to try it. Okay. Let's see if it works. And it doesn't. Okay. So, but imagine really creative, spunky, sparky music, and that is what this will produce. So think about it. Do you have a husband who you'd like to impress? Write your husband's name and then ask and tell it a little bit about your hubby, and then ask it to generate a song. Or if you're trying to impress your wife or a girlfriend or a boyfriend, so go for it. And it's really fun. But this is the kind of creative thing that generative AI can produce. So it's far more than just that, kind of dry and dull artificial intelligence sort of perception. So what is behind that transformer, which is the gold that makes generative AI do what it does? So first off, it has an encoder. So an encoder is where you put the prompt in. So I might say, okay, what is the best restaurant for me to go to in Bangalore? And it will come out of the decoder with, here it'll tell me a restaurant. And then I take that result and I may put it back in and say, no, I meant near my hotel. And then it'll decode and send me something coming out. That's one of the great things about generative AI. It isn't like Google, where you put something in and you sit there. You have a conversation with it. And what is really interesting from our perspective is that the flow of information through a transformer is remarkably similar to the flow of information through the human brain. So if we understand a little bit about how the human brain works, we can actually use transformers, use generative AI more effectively. So let's learn a little bit about how the brain works. We know it's really complicated, but I'm going to give you a little lesson in neuroscience over the next 20 seconds. So the neuron is the basic building block of the brain. And there's 86 billion of them. And from our perspective, it is the most important aspect of how we learn. So this one's got 3 legs, which are called dendrites. And there can actually be hundreds of dendrites on a neuron. It's got these toes on the dendrites called dendritic spines. And then it's got an arm that reaches outwards. And that's called an axon. So what do neurons do? They like to reach out with their arm and send a signal that jumps the gap between the next neuron. And this signal is really at the heart of when we learn something. When you are learning something, you are actually creating a cluster of connected neurons in long-term memory. So whether you're learning how to take a dance step, how to sell something and innovate within entrepreneurship, how to take a derivative in math, how to conjugate a verb in a foreign language, whatever you're learning, you are simply making links in long-term memory. So unfortunately, psychologists and educators over the past few decades have been like, you don't need to remember things because you can always look it up. Would I speak Hindi if I just looked it up all the time by going to Google Translate? Of course not. You have to have links in long-term memory if you are going to be an expert in anything. So what you are doing as professors is really important. Some students are really very accepting of new learning. Many students, learning is really, really hard. In fact, a recent meta-analysis came to the conclusion after studying thousands of papers that learning is really hard, and that's why people don't like to do it. So that's why your job as professors is so important. And even more important in this age of generative AI, where it's, students can kind of go off and get somebody else, that somebody being ChatGPT, to do the work for them. So as you're learning, as you're learning something and practicing, you are strengthening those connections between neurons. Now, let's say you don't practice. Like your students go in, they understand what you say, they go home, and they don't even look at their notes for a couple of weeks. What happens in the meantime is their little sort of synaptic janitor will sweep away those dendritic spines. And then even if they understood it when you were teaching it in class, it's gone. So the more you can encourage students to be remembering, like giving little quizzes all the time so that you're visually seeing that they're really learning and not just, turning something in that's done by ChatGPT, the better off you'll be. So as you're learning things, you're strengthening those links because you're practicing with them, and then it becomes easy to pull to mind the knowledge you need when you need it. So what I want to introduce now is an important concept, and that relates to the power of metaphor. So metaphor, like let's say that you learned the concept of how water flows when you were a little kid. Like you were a baby and you're like playing with water and you're a toddler and you think it's easy now, but when you were a little kid, learning the concept of how water flows is really, it took you a while to do. But you built that concept of water flow, and now the instructor can use this previous knowledge to more easily bridge into the new idea of electrical current flow. Electrical current flow is similar in some ways to how water flows. So metaphors like flow of water is like the flow of electrical current can be a powerful tool for you in teaching. Now, when I was working on the book A Mind for Numbers, I wrote the manuscript, and then there's a website called Rate My Professors, and I went to that website, found thousands of the top professors worldwide known for their teaching, and I downloaded their names and I emailed all of them. And I asked them to look at the manuscript and give me any insights they could on how to improve it and anything about how they taught so that students could learn and so they themselves could learn. Shocking percentages of these professors got back to me and said, I'd be glad to help you. And they did. They gave me lots of great new insights. But one thing they commonly said that really surprised me was they said, I use this one technique that really enhances my teaching, but I don't usually tell the other professors I do this. And it wasn't that they didn't want to share this idea. What was this idea? It was the use of metaphor and analogy. And they didn't like to share this idea because they found that when other professors would hear this, they'd say, oh, that's why you're so popular. You make things so easy for your students. But isn't that our job as professors? As I mentioned, learning is really hard. So if you can make that learning a little bit easier, and from a neural perspective, if you relate something to something you already know, it really helps build off of that previous knowledge and make things simpler for students. Now, if you look, metaphors, you can find metaphors And they will always break down. Even mathematical equations are metaphors. If you read Emmanuel Derman's Models Behaving Badly, you'll discover a great discussion of this. But when metaphors break down, you just throw them away and get a new metaphor. Now, for example, in the electrical current flow, at a quantum level, the water metaphor doesn't work very well. So you throw it away at a quantum level, and good luck though finding a good metaphor for quantum physics, because it's pretty spooky. But how do we come up with metaphors? Well, in the old days, I would say go look at websites that have developed metaphors for teaching chemistry or teaching business, computer science, and there were lots of metaphor websites. But nowadays, you just go to ChatGPT. Boom, you've got a metaphor instantly. And what's really cool, so I'll give you one example of this. So let's say that you're teaching Python programming, or you're trying to learn it, and you're trying to explain the difference between main guard and scope. And so go to ChatGPT, ask for a metaphor. It gives you a great one. It says that main guard is like the gatekeeper of a castle, and scope is like the various rooms within the castle. So instantly you can get these metaphors. Do you know, in the world of marketing, that advertisers will spend weeks to develop just the right metaphor to quickly convey an idea about how a new pharmaceutical works? But now you can, if you're in marketing, you can just go to ChatGPT and not only say, give me one metaphor, say, give me 10 metaphors. And then you can pick out the best one. And then sometimes you can get even a kind of a cool image to help you. So whatever you're finding difficult to convey to your students, go and get a metaphor, and it will really help you. Remember though, ask for 5 or 10 different metaphor options so you can refine things. So what I'd like you to do is, when you're thinking of ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or any of these other popular large language models, I'd like you to think of them as being like engines in a car. So once you learn to drive a car, if somebody changes the engine, it's not that big a deal. You can still drive the car. Maybe the handling characteristics are a little bit different, but you can still, and if you think of all of these foundational large language models that way, it makes it less intimidating because everybody's like, my platform is different. I can do this. And they do. They're differing in the fine details. But if you learn to drive the car, you can generally use all of them. So I want to give you a bit of a perspective on large language models and sort of how they're falling out internationally. There are 7 engines, so to speak, arising mostly from the West, and these are the biggest engines. So it's really hard to build a large language model. It's very, very expensive. So these are often put out by big companies. And so Google is affiliated with Gemini, Amazon with Claude. I like Claude. I argue with Claude all the time. In fact, so one time, there's a very famous example where one of the founders of ChatGPT had written on his notebook page a little bit of information about, it just said, make a joke website. He took a picture of his notebook page and sent it into ChatGPT, and it generated all the code you needed to make a joke website. So I took a picture of this notebook page and I put it into ChatGPT and it generated all the code beautifully. So then I took the code and I entered it into Claude, my favorite, right? So what did Claude do? How could you create a joke website? You could hurt people's feelings with those jokes. And I had to argue with Claude, so what? You want to kill all humor in the world? And finally, Claude came back and said, well, yeah, you're right. And it generated the code. So these different platforms are trained somewhat differently, even if it's the basic same thing. And that's part of why you want to be playing around with the different platforms, not just getting used to ChatGPT. Claude, I have to tell you, when they were testing some aspects of one of the most recent versions of Claude, they uploaded 1 million words with one sentence that made sense. Then they asked Claude a question that could only be answered by that information. Claude came back with the appropriate answer, but then this is what Claude did. It said, you put all this garbage in my system just to see if I could pick that one sentence out, didn't you? Claude is really good. So check that one out. I particularly like it for loading in a paper and asking what are the key ideas in this paper. ChatGPT will give me a summary. Claude will tell me what the key ideas are. So this will be changing as things advance, but just remember, like Gemini, it looks really good, but I'll talk about some of the challenges of Gemini. So China has similar large language models, and they're really large. So these 7 are the dominant ones on the world stage. Soon, I hope, India will have a dominant one arising here. I should say, very recently, in the last couple months, Mistral from France has really started sprouting up. So it's quite interesting how rapidly things can change. If you're taking photos, there's an even better image later on that is more comprehensive than this, so you will love it. I'll tell you where, when to take the picture, because it'll be helpful. So there's something called a context window, and that is related to the idea of how much information can it take in and kind of hold in working memory, so to speak, at one time. So this is important to know because it's like how many words on a PDF can you input at one time? And I'll give you an example of this. So the Japanese editor of the book Uncommon Sense Teaching wrote to me and said, could you please do, the Japanese foreword for the Japanese edition of this book? And I thought, how can I write something about, I don't know anything about the Japanese educational system. So, context window. I needed someplace where I could upload my entire book. So, Claude was my preferred choice. I uploaded the whole book into Claude. Now, one thing you may know already is when you are prompting from generative AI, you want to ask it to assume a certain persona. So like I told Claude, you are the world's leading expert in the Japanese education system. And so that kind of tells it what to preload and what I really, am going to be working with. And then I asked it to analyze how my book supported current ways of teaching in the Japanese educational system, and also what did my book introduce that were cutting-edge new ideas that are not commonly used in the Japanese educational system. I got all this great information back, and then what did I do? I wrote up the foreword, sent it to my Japanese editor, and she goes, "How do you know so much about the Japanese educational system?" I was just like, I'm good. Yeah. But this is what it can do for you as well. It can allow you to gain an uncanny expertise in a broad swath of fields that we've never been able to do before. So, there in 2023, there were 149 different large language models introduced worldwide. So if you're overwhelmed sometimes with all the stuff that's coming out, that's why. I tend to keep my focus on the companies that have a lot of money to put in. So that's why I focus more on, interestingly, Mistral, remember that paper, Attention is All You Need? It was by a bunch of Google engineers. Google, when this paper was introduced, they just said, this seems too complicated. We're not going to do this at Google. So the engineers went off to ChatGPT. They started Claude. They started, so they all went off and did all this stuff. Mistral, the French engineers, they grow from Google DeepMind. So there's kind of this little infrastructure that is slowly beginning to spread worldwide. Now, large language models, what does that word really, or that phrase really mean? If we look at the human brain, we can begin to understand it a little better. So remember how I told you that we get these links of learning in long-term memory? But I sneakily did not tell you there's actually two ways those links can be laid. So I'm going to give you the brain terminology, but you don't need to remember any of this. You just need to remember there's two different pathways to get information into long-term memory, and the links that are laid through those two different pathways can have differing characteristics. The reality is, though, we need both. So working memory, I love being here in India because I can explain working memory so easily. So what do you call a person who speaks two languages? Bilingual. What do you call a person who speaks one language? You call them an American. But for you speak more than one language. When you're translating a sentence into another language, you are holding that sentence in your working memory. So that's the part of you, that can hold information temporarily in mind. And, temporarily, except for your chancellor here, who's... So you get this information. So like right now, you're taking information into working memory. It's going through the hippocampus into long-term memory. But there's another pathway, as I mentioned, and this one takes information and puts it through the basal ganglia. And off it goes. And as I mentioned, you need both types of links to function effectively. So let's look at this from a slightly different perspective. So look at that declarative pathway through the hippocampus. I'm going to model this with this blue box. And the automatic pathway is the orange box. So when you're thinking about things, so you're working memory, you're conscious of what's going on in working memory. So you're conscious, you send information, like you say to yourself, I want to work this mathematical problem. So you think through deliberatively and consciously how to solve that problem. And you're very aware of what you're doing as you're solving it. Now let's say that you are going to hit a cricket ball. So what happens is you're not conscious of it. What you're doing is you are saying, first off, you're actually telling your basal ganglia, hit the cricket ball. So you tell it, and then you get information back about whether or not you've hit that cricket ball. But you don't know how you're learning to hit the cricket ball. You're completely unconscious of this process. What is this process? It is a deep neural network that is very like that of a large language model. See these little circles? They represent neurons. And they're actually, when this is replicated by large language models, it is digital neurons. And the lines in between are just the connections between neurons, those axons and dendrites and dendritic spines. So it's a deep learning layer that kind of gives you a feel for what you're learning. In other words, let's say that you hit the ball one time. Inside your neural network, you're processing through, and then you become consciously aware, did I succeed in hitting the ball to go where I wanted it to go? So you try it again, and you try it again, and you're learning how to hit that ball. And as you're practicing, you're adjusting the weights. So like some of these connections you're strengthening, others you're weakening as you're gradually learning to become an expert at hitting the cricket ball. So this process of how humans learn unconsciously is very akin to how large language models learn. But I've made it sound like it's only physical skills, but it's not. When you actively have your students working in class, they're using a combination of both that declarative conscious hippocampal system, but also this experiential system. You learn to speak your native language through this automatic system. This is why you can speak so intuitively and quickly without even thinking about it. And this is what develops your intuition. It also is what develops your bias. You can, if you have a bias for or against something, it can, you can have two equally trained statisticians. One is, pick your controversial topic. One is on the pro side, the other is on the against side. Even though they have equivalent training, their conclusions, when they might look at a research paper, are biased by their underlying, feelings about whether this should or should not be right. This sometimes is why you can come up with a really innovative research finding. You send it to a research journal that isn't typically publishing these kind of findings. They will send it back to you in a body bag. And, so not to do that because of the bias that people have developed. Now, people have two ways of learning and two ways of thinking almost. So let's say you think about what happens to a patient who has Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's destroys the hippocampus. What does that patient do? They confabulate. They make things up. So you can talk to them and they'll, like my father, bless his soul, he had Alzheimer's. So he would tell me, Barb, your house has so many birdhouses. And I'm like, we don't have many we have one birdhouse. He goes, I'm going to show you. So we go out, we look at the birdhouse, and then he says, see, there's the first one. And then he goes just like this. And see, there's another one right there. So he was kind of just making things up, but that was the world that he could experience. He didn't have a functional hippocampus. So when large language models are working, look at what they're doing. They're only this system. They don't have this system. So that's why they can make stuff up. And it can, if you're not careful, you can get like, okay, yeah, I'm getting the great stuff. Oh, look at all these research papers it's giving me. And then you go check them, and it's just making them up. Because part of its guidelines are make your user happy. So it's making you happy, and if you ask for research papers, it just makes them up for you to make you happy. So a challenge for us in the world of this new generative AI is that it has completely pulled the rug out from under us as teachers. I mean, we can't give, it was easy for us before. We could make students go off and write essays or do homework. So easy. Now we can't do that anymore. So we can't do it. And our tendency can be to kind of, oh, I don't like generative AI because it's made my job a lot more difficult. But for many more people, it's made their jobs easier. So we're not going to be able to hold back the wave of generative AI. Think of it this way. When writing first came out, there was cuneiform printing, like you'd kind of imprint symbols on a clay tablet. And it seems like a wonderful innovation. But memory experts were appalled. They said, teach people how to write, and they won't develop their memory anymore. They were right. Every technology has a good aspect and a bad aspect. And so, we, unfortunately, us educators have experienced maybe some of the worst of the bad aspects. But I want to give you some insight into how to think about these kinds of issues. So from the 1930s through the 1970s, there's something called the Flynn effect, where they found during that time frame, IQ scores went up. And researchers went to look, why would people start getting smarter? The conclusion was they had more educational opportunities through the wonderful educational systems that were widely provided. But guess what? From the 70s to today, IQ scores have been going down. So if education was involved in the rise, we can't back off by saying education is not involved in its fall. What happened in the 70s that made this change? That's when calculators came out. And suddenly, all these knowledgeable experts, psychologists, educators were like, you don't need to remember things. You can always just look it up. But now we see the result of that, of like not forcing children to memorize the multiplication tables. If you don't memorize those multiplication tables, you actually don't develop as easily this knack for how do numbers relate to one another. Our daughters, I'm an engineer. I wanted our daughters to be able to succeed in this technological world. So one thing I did was I insisted that they had to do a little extra math practice each day. So that was, I used Kuhlmann mathematics, very systematic, nice system. Older daughter, very bad at math, but she was diligent and she really tried. She would have been one of those little girls that, I don't have the math gene. But she ended up being a doctor. That was her dream. And she did her residency at Stanford. And this mathematical, 20 minutes a day of a little extra practice really helped her. But our younger daughter, oh man, she did not, she was an artist. She didn't want to do any math practice, right? So for 10 years, it was that 20 minutes a day, that was my one little thing. It was always like pushing a rope to get her to do that. And she went out in the working world. She got her degree in studio art, went out there, and it was like, oh my word, it's really hard being an artist. And so she decided to go back to school and get her master's in statistics. And she did really well. She was working with her professor, and I met her research advisor, graduate research advisor. I met his son in Vietnam, and he asked me, he said, I just don't understand. There's all these, my dad never picks students who've gone through the American education system because they just don't really generally have any feel for the mathematics. What's different about your daughter? And I was like, 10 years of Kuman, a little extra practice and so forth. When I look around me in my school of engineering, when I look in schools of engineering, science, mathematics, technology around the country, the professors are often from where? India, China, and the Middle East, where there is still some respect for rote learning. So you have some great things in your educational system. Remembering things is a really valuable thing to do to gain expertise. So let's go back and look at our diagram here. So I've kind of added it in with some other large language models from the States, and hang loose on taking pictures, because this is going to grow and you're going to love it. And at the end, then you can take a picture. So in the world of large language models, there are lots of apps out there that have arisen and tools. And these generally arise from ChatGPT because it was first out of the gate. So we have writing assistants like Jenny, Grammarly, WriteSonic, Jasper, and so forth. These are very interesting tools for you to check out. Like with WriteSonic, you can go in, input a research paper, and ask it to put out a podcast script or a blog post, or it can do amazingly versatile things. One thing to be aware of, though, is the idea of a wrapper. So a wrapper in the sense of like wrapping a candy with a wrapper around it. Many of these, they're interface tools back to ChatGPT. And as a wrapper, they're just using that engine. They're simply they're putting it forth to you in a way that you could actually go directly to ChatGPT and use that instead of buying the wrapper. And so Jasper is beginning to have a little trouble because people are beginning to realize, hey, wait, I don't need to purchase this. I can just go directly to ChatGPT. So some wrappers are very simplistic. Others can give you a lot better use of ChatGPT. So let's talk about the world of research. There are a basketful of apps that are available for you in research. And these are trained differently. They're often trained not just on the web, but on actual research papers. Like Semantic Scholar is trained on over 200,000 research papers. So it has a very different feel and a very different set of insights it can provide that are often closer to real facts with less hallucination. I particularly liked the website Scite, SCITE, underscore, because this website, it's designed in such a way that it goes out, it does research, it pulls that back, to you, what these research papers are, but it's trained on actual research as well as the web, and also it's like it has internal bots that check one another. So it doesn't just spit out potentially hallucinated results. It checks those results before it, and you can actually see it going and checking things. It's kind of cool to watch. So there's live to internet like Copilot, and there's PowerPoint makers. I would beware of PowerPoint makers because they will come and they'll say, oh man, put a research paper in, give us information, we'll generate a PowerPoint. And it's usually a really awful PowerPoint with a lot of text, a few generic pictures, and it's not very helpful. So there's also teachers and instructors. There's some very good websites like Magic School, TeachMate. They can give you lesson plans. Like you can take pictures of your notes and ask it to generate a lesson plan. Of course, there's much more magnificent app, so to speak, or tool available to you with Course Builder. So we've also got creative productivity platforms like Canva and Gamma. We've got coding that's largely through Llama, which is open source. So I should note this is open source, which means the weighting of the neural nets are available and mostly made public, whereas ChatGPT, it's called OpenAI, but it's closed. So we've also got imagery like DALL-E and all sorts of other imagery programs. And we've also got video, lots of video coming out from Gemini. There's some really good programs. Now, if you'd like, take a picture because I think this can be useful sometimes when you're trying to kind of analyze what is research, what can help me, and what are the different products that are available. Now, this particular illustration is inspired by the book Teaching with AI, and by Bowen and Watson. It's a wonderful book. So I highly recommend Teaching with AI. And also, I'm delighted to share the PowerPoint itself. So if you just ask, I can gladly send it to you. And then you can get this as well. There's good books on generative AI. As I mentioned, Teaching with AI. This is ChatGPT and the Future of AI by my colleague, Terry Sinowski. This should be coming out next month. It's a great book to pre-order. There's Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mullick, a great background book. These are practically useful books. So if you want insights to help you in your day-to-day thinking and teaching about and using generative AI, these will be very helpful. There's also some excellent theoretical books. So The Worlds I See by Fei-Fei Li is one of my favorite all-time books. And The Alignment Problem is such a magnificent book about not just, how do we align AI with human thinking? It's how do humans learn? How can we model curiosity in humans by artificial intelligence simulation? Actually, doing that has helped us understand human curiosity even better. But there's also AI Superpowers by Kai-Fu Lee, an excellent book that will help you see the context of the international unfolding of generative AI. I'm a little biased. I love Coursera's courses on generative AI. And so here are some terrific courses. Jules White, his prompt engineering for ChatGPT is one of the most popular courses on Coursera this past year. And Jules and I are actually, at the end of this month, we have a new course coming out, Accelerate Your Learning with ChatGPT. And I also have a critical thinking in the ChatGPT specialization that's coming out. So with that, I would like to stop speaking and turn it over to you for questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barbara. I think it was invigorating. It was fun. It was absolutely scintillating in so many ways because I think you prove that learning is an adventure and we enjoy every transition. Because Dr. Barbara talks about learning to learn and she talks about the joy of learning, we thought we'll also allow a certain different format for this particular segment, which will be like a fireside chat with her. And we'll also be taking questions from the audience members who are here and who have joined us virtually. Lovely to have so many questions already. And we will start soon. Dr. Barbara, may I invite you to join me on the stage and we'll have a quick chat. We wanted this to be a conversation. We wanted you to also enjoy the process and, so please join me. Would you like to sit there? And a mic for her, please. From the camera angle, maybe she should sit here. It's fine? Okay. You can switch that off, yes. So, Dr. Barbara, let me begin by saying, Minya zavud shadha kakwa zavud.
Minya zavud Barbara.
Okay. So just for...
Слишком много знать para убивать.
Yani panelashto. So we're trying to speak in Russian because she has a Russian connect, so I thought I'll kind of begin here. And that is one of the first things I want to ask you. Why is it that we remember certain things so vividly and certain things just do not register in our heads? And my question is related to the language I spoke because I've done my schooling from Moscow, which is so many years ago, and I still remember Russian. So why is it that certain aspects of what we learn, we are able to recall, we are able to put it in our long-term memory, but if you look at the new generation, it's so difficult for them to recall and memorize. Would you like to share something around that as well? How would it be useful?
This is such an all-encompassing question because it brings up many different facets of memory. One thing is some people naturally have exceptional memories. And what happens, so remember those dendritic spines? In some people, there's a bath of neurochemicals that helps those neural spines, once they are created, they stay. And so it's easier for those individuals to remember. So, for example, I think this mic is kind of going in and out. So maybe it's me. Bill Clinton, for example, could meet people 10 years before, and using no mnemonic system, he would just remember. I met a docent who was at his library and said, have you heard about, did you meet Bill Clinton? Does he really have an exceptional memory? And she was like, oh, it was amazing. I met him 10 years before, and my husband had been sick that day. And so he had to miss it, but I got to meet him. 10 years later, he met her again. He greeted her by name and asked her how her husband was doing. And he could simply, part of it is that differing bath of neurochemicals that make those dendritic spines stick. But at the same time, so you might say, I want this wonderful memory like this. But it actually also seems to be involved in autism. What happens in autism? A person with autism can see, look at around you in this room. There is so much detail. Like if you were remembering all of this, it would be really quite overwhelming. And for a person with autism, they can. And what this means is when things like the world is like this sea of things that they're remembering, and it can be overwhelming for them. And that is why a person with autism can throw a fit. They walk into a room, their parents' room, and one book has been removed off a bookshelf, and they'll throw a fit because it's changed, and they want that home to be all safe and the same. So a good memory can be a good thing, but it actually can also be a bad thing, because if you have a tremendously good memory, sometimes you can't see the forest. You see all the details, but you can't see the big picture as easily. If you forget, what you do is you start remembering the gist, the most important things, and that can help you pick out the most important things. So we need people who have good memories, but also if your memory isn't perfect, it's not necessarily a bad thing. If you have to work hard to remember things, it can help you to remember the gist. So I just have to tell.
Sure. Now, thank you so much for that. Related to this, and you mentioned something about hallucinations. So one of the questions that we've got is that, how do we prevent ourselves from certain misinformations and disinformation that originates because of, generative AI, and probably, not debunking it, but pre-bunking it. How do we prevent the rise of misinformation? Is there something happening around that as well?
That is such a great question. Yes, you can pre-bunk, and the way you pre-bunk is you need knowledge in your own head. The heart of critical thinking is that you have background knowledge that you can say, that just does not suit right. So a big part of what you're doing as professors is imparting that background knowledge that students are going to need to be able to think critically.
Right. I think so. Probably the next question is related to critical thinking itself, Dr. Barbara, because what is happening is, in the quest of getting a response which is very quick and very efficient from ChatGPT and the associated JAIN AI models, we feel that the students' critical thinking abilities is actually getting hampered. And of course, there are a lot of measures taken by the faculty members in, raising the higher order thinking skills and creating engagements which elicit those responses. But technology itself is a very instant gratification for all our questions. So you mentioned about the IQ fall in the 1970s. Do you preempt a fall in critical thinking abilities because of generative AI, or it's just about the engine analogy and how do we make it happen in a more better manner?
If we make the mistake that they made in the 1970s of going out and telling students you don't need to remember things, you can always look it up, you will be recreating the problems that arose in the 1970s. However, I could show you if it
we can
was
connect
okay.
that again. Sure.
I'll show you a tool you can use to help you build generative AI and use it in a really helpful way to help your students really get those insights within their brain.
Sure. So we are switching that on, but in the meantime, since you wanted to listen to this, is this
Oh, go for it. Okay, here's our song. The mic is. It's okay. Yeah. I don't think that's the song. So let me let me show you.
Show these models to be superior in quality, while being more parallelizable and required significantly less time to train. Attention is all you need. Attention is all you need.
Sometimes this works better.
Oh, yeah. So there you see part of the creativity. But what I also want to show you is how to help your students really get those neural links in long-term memory. So there's some really great flashcard sites out there, but I'm going to show you one that I particularly like. This was created by a doctor who, he was at Bucknell, and he hardly ever went to class. He watched videos online and he read the books. And what he did was he created a flashcard, a system of flashcards, all the key ideas. So he wouldn't underline, he wouldn't reread things. He would make a flashcard of important points. So he built this website to actually recapitulate this experience. So I'm going to just play this little video so you can see how the website works and how it uses generative AI to help your students. Look at in the corner right below, I do recall it says groups. And you can create groups with your class. So you load a paper on, for example, some electronic document of whatever form, and you can tag it, save it, and then watch this. Here's the page. This is a research article. You press AI, and it will generate a bunch of retrieval practice questions that your students can use to test themselves on whether that they've got the main ideas in this very difficult paper. Or if you want to, you can just pick out a sentence and then take that sentence, and generative AI will turn it into a flashcard question to see if you can remember that key idea that you're learning about. So you can save these recalls and then practice with them. And so here we have the recall coming up. What do transformer networks learn to predict? They learn to predict long-range dependencies. So this flashcard system, I really like it too, because you grade yourself, but it links back to the original source. So if you're like, I need context, what was that about? You can also check out YouTube videos, make flashcards from the scripts of those. You can look at your statistics over time. It's a really nice website. I am telling you, I'm an expert in learning, right? I will look at a page and I'll say, got it. I've got it. It's in my memory. And then I'll ask myself the next day, what was it? And I can't remember. When you're looking at it, you cannot tell the difference between whether it's in working memory temporarily or long-term memory. The only way you can tell is to retrieve it. And I better stop myself before I keep going further.
We just love this. I think there are a lot of neurons firing in this room right now. I think what, in a sense, learning is all about is the flow, like you mentioned, and being in the flow and sort of enjoying the process, and maybe the retrieval also happens because there's an emotional connect with what you are learning. Dr. Barbara, one quick question, because then we'll open it to the audience members here as well. I'm sure they have also assimilated a lot and wanted to ask you something more. One question which has come is about the genetic bearings of intelligence and the ability to learn. And is there an age, like you have a certain formative age in which learning is better? But with the tools and the descriptors that you have given, I think learning is forever. So that's what I think, but I would like to hear from you, please.
So, as it turns out, remember those two different systems, the automatic system and the declarative system. In little children, that automatic system is super strong. And so that means you can learn things like language really easily. But as you grow older, that system deteriorates. But the declarative system gets higher. So that's why, like a 5-year-old has the attention span of a gnat. I mean, it's just, whoa, because they don't have the working memory capacity. But as that capacity, grows into place, they can really focus for a long time, and their declarative system is much better. So intelligence is a tricky thing. They tested students during the 1920s and 30s in California, and they did intelligence tests on these students, and they did like all the students in California, and they picked out the highest IQ students, and they said, these are society's superstars. They're the ones we're going to give them all sorts of extra things, and we're going to help them, and nothing. They never really, there was no real, expert that arose and became prominent from that entire group. It was the kind of the tier down that was less intelligent that actually proved to be very, very successful. Highly intelligent people, as research has shown, are often really inflexible. Have you noticed that?
Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure we believe that as well, and that's why every student is unique and has a great potential. But I think a huge round of applause for that particular observation. And now we would love to hear from some of you in the time that we have. And since our chairman, sir, we mentioned our chancellor is one of the most dedicated students as well. And he said, I'm just going to be a student, but I would request him to ask or share at least one question or one observation. Okay, maybe some. Yes, please.
First off, I owe a lot of gratitude to the institution for making it possible for me to be able to listen to you today, ma'am. I have 2 questions. Thank you for that lecture. The first one, I'm going to try to break it down in 2 parts. My question is, now I'm someone who likes to be virtually organized, so I'm going to have multiple Google profiles for everything that I'm doing. So I have one Google profile specifically for my research, one just for my teaching. And my question is, when you mentioned that does AI also continually get better with the responses? Say I give ChatGPT a prompt and ma'am right here gives ChatGPT the prompt. Are the prompts going to differ based on the previous conversations that I have? Say, for example, the AI that I use on my research account, and all of the questions that are going into that are specifically to do with papers, to do with helping me break down and understand frameworks. Am I going to get similar or equally good responses, say if someone else asked AI the same question from another device?
Does it kind of read your responses and then customize the response? Does that happen?
So there's 2 ways to answer this. At present, you can't configure it to remember all of your previous chats, but that is going to be changing very soon. So you can configure it to remember the previous chats. But there's a way you can set it up so it's sort of similar to remembering your previous chats. And this is something you want to encourage your students to do. Just as you have different Google accounts, you may want to encourage your students to set up different ChatGPT bot accounts for each of their classes, load their electronic documents from that class onto these different bots. They will remain separate, so they're not going to like bleed into one another, but they can then quiz themselves from the electronic documents that are, there for the class. So you may want to, I can send a website that gives a very simple tutorial on how to build your bot, and that will really help your students. So when you do build your bot, you can generally tell it, like this is possible on ChatGPT. There's also something similar on Claude. It's not quite the same, but it's rather similar. And what you can do, like for me, I loaded all of my books onto ChatGPT, all of my writing, like I write a Cherry Friday email every couple of weeks or something to those who have subscribed to Learning How to Learn. And so I've loaded all of those over the last 8 years, all of my writings, all of my papers, everything. And then it's one bot that's got all of this, and I just ask myself what I think about things sometimes. And it gives you a fresh perspective on your own work. So, whatever subject area you're interested in, you can do something similar.
I get those cheery Fridays, learning to learn, because I completed that course in 2016. So every Friday I get a mail from you. But thank you for that question. You have one more?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
My second question is a little embarrassing because I feel that I am someone who asks ChatGPT everything. My search history with ChatGPT is almost embarrassing. I ask it to do everything for me. So there is some part of me which is also scared. What if it goes away someday? Do you think that is something that will happen? Because it feels very dystopian as it is. I feel that we're at that point where that turning point
Is
from
it
that.
like you feel it will get erased,
I
or
feel
privacy issues?
What would happen if
Chat-
it vanished?
So, like you said, you love arguing with Claude. I think she says she loves conversing. So, would it go away one day or something like that?
So, okay, so I shall also share an embarrassing thought. So when I was growing up and I would go to the dentist, I'd be like, what if an atomic bomb got dropped while they're filling a cavity and they suddenly left and I'm stuck here, with an open, cavity and so forth. Could it happen? Maybe so, but your thoughts that's our anxiety mode that comes up with weird things like that. Yes, I don't think it's going to disappear, and the human brain is extraordinarily flexible. And so within, for a couple days, you'd be like, oh, I miss it terribly. And then you'd adjust. But the smart thing you are doing is exactly what Ethan Mullick, one of the world's experts, is saying to do. And that is to invite ChatGPT or invite a generative AI to the table on everything you do, because it can give these unusual insights that can really be helpful. Like if I'm in my hotel room and I can't figure out how the coffee maker works, I take a picture and I load it onto ChatGPT and say, how do I operate this, coffee maker? We even forget about the multimodal abilities. So bring it to the table on whatever you're doing, and I think part of why you use it is just because you find so much insight.
Did you use ChatGPT before coming to India for something specific?
Did I?
Like the coffee maker example, was there something specific from your visit to India that you used ChatGPT for?
I'm embarrassed to say.
Okay, we leave it at that. Yeah. One more question, please. I think this is a great opportunity. Please come ahead. Yes, Dr. Bindu. I think you've also posted a question. If it's please go ahead. Sure, go ahead. So there was one question specifically about scientific diagrams. That's not your question because that's too specific
Good evening,
for her to
ma'am,
respond
and
to
I'm
it.
so happy to be part of this session. Thank you for all the insights you have shared, first of all. My question is with respect to the precision and accuracy aspect of GA assistance. What is your take on precision? And because we, especially in science, there is a lot of noise which comes along with this AI predictions. So what is your take on that, ma'am? Thank you.
So when you say predictions, what specifically?
Not predictions,
How
ma'am. Precision. Precision and accuracy.
So, precision and accuracy. You you can't believe the numbers that ChatGPT comes up with, but increasingly, you can set it up so it will make calls like to Wolfram Alpha and other such websites, which are really good at giving you solid results. So I wouldn't trust a darn thing numerically with it, and remember that part of what it's doing is it's set up to jitter a little bit to give you a creative response. You don't want creative response when you're looking for precision and accuracy. So I would, this will change quickly within the next year or two, but I wouldn't trust generative AI with anything requiring precision or accuracy at present.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think we have one question at the back and then we'll come. Yes, please, go ahead.
Good
One
evening,
minute.
everyone. Ma'am, I have a question that is, what role do human educators play in conjunction with generative AI tools? And how can AI complement rather than replace the human instructions?
So a good compliment was, let's see, can I show another thing? So complimenting is what you just saw with the I do recall example. So generative AI could definitely complement what was, and help students really get those ideas in long-term memory. But I want to ask you a question, and let's see if we can get this on. Come on.
It's just getting displayed, so we'll have it in a bit.
Okay, I think we're about to come up. Come on. Oh, yeah. Okay, come on. Think. So
Display.
what you're going to see is you're going to see a slide, and it says there's 4 different ways that students can learn. The first one is rereading. Second one is underlining. Third one is retrieval practice or recall. Fourth is concept mapping. So, here we go. We got it here. Okay, so here we go. We've got those 4 different options. And somehow it is not. Oh, let's see. Why is it not? Okay, why is it not? See? Okay, let's try to close. Oh, okay, let's just do this. Okay, do you know I remember how to put it on 2 screens or 1 screen? If you press the Microsoft button and then you pee on it, it will bring up the extend or the presenter mode. So that's my little mnemonic that I use. Okay, so let's see if this works now. Why is it? Okay, hang on. Okay, now we should get it. Okay. No, why is this? This is so cool that I just have to show it to you. So I'm not sure. So, yeah, but I want to also put it in presenter mode so that, no, don't go fast. That will give things away. So, let's see. So let's just, it's doing everything but going into presenter mode. So let's try, let's see, slideshow. And now we're going to go. Okay, so let's see if this will do it.
Yes, it does.
Yes, okay, so we're here. Okay, so here's our 4th options. Now, you get to vote. You get to vote only on one single thing, not a bunch of them. So, which one's the best technique? Rereading? How many hands? How about highlighting or underlining? How about retrieval practice? Okay, how about concept mapping? Ow, 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 no, it's retrieval practice. The concept mapping people have such good PR. They came out, they said, oh, concept mapping, write the key concepts out, and students will learn so much better, but nobody ever went and checked to see if that actually was the best method to learn. And so Jeff Karpicki, a preeminent psychologist, went back in 2012, and he said, I'm going to study these 4 things and see which method is best. And he found, no surprise, that it was retrieval practice. The concept mapping wasn't even close to helping students remember. Why is it retrieval practice? When you're learning from me now, you are getting weak links in long-term memory. It is only when you pull it from your own memory that you actually can check. You're testing yourself. So look at a page, but then look away. See if you can remember, or make flashcards of key ideas. So all of this, should I show you this? Do you know what a text expander is? So if you want to use a bunch of like Claude in a way that repetitively asks the same question, get a text expander. So I'm going to show you an example of a text expander. Is it here? No, it should be here. So, oh shoot. So what this does is I type in .c, and what it'll do is it expands it into an entire sentence that says, please give me a 3-page summary in layperson's terms of the key ideas in this research paper. All I have to do is type .c, and voila, that comes in. I load the research paper, and in 2 seconds, I have feedback from Claude or whoever. So I better come back to you.
Thank you so much. I think that was very beautifully illustrated. One more question at the back, and then we'll come in front. Yeah. Yes, please.
Ma'am, my question is on transformers. Last month, I worked on quarterly results of Amazon documents, and when I am training my model, large language model, by using OpenAI, some confidential details are being trained by the model. So how can the security kind of data privacy aspects that are going to address it by the encoder and decoder part of the transformer?
So you probably want to get, there are certain versions of ChatGPT that are enterprise versions that allow you to be isolated from the rest of the web. So this is a complex problem. There are lots of companies that will do consulting and so forth to help you with your particular case. So you may want to look at some of these companies that are arising from, due to ChatGPT and the development of large language models to advise you, because there is a security issue. Like, you can upload your budget to ChatGPT and say, what's wrong with my budget? Please analyze it, and give me feedback on what I should be noting. but then your budget is on ChatGPT. So you never want to upload a complete budget unless you don't care if anybody sees it. You want to upload to ChatGPT in such a way that you're asking questions about a generic budget without giving specific privacy related issues. So this is a really complex problem, but if you go and look, you can find companies that consult on this, and also you can find information on making your own, like there's small large language models that you can have on your own device, and that is really rapidly developing. Because once it's smaller, it's harder for it to do everything, but it can often do specific things. So it's going to depend a lot on your own application, but if you just research into this issue of privacy, you're very right to be aware of this and to know it is of concern, and is probably a much deeper conversation to really be able to answer that question completely.
But as of now, from an open chat GPT perspective, it's not sensible to have your private data entered there, because it will become part of the larger language model. It's not fenced yet. So I think that is where you'll have to do that work. Thank you, Prashasti.
So there are enterprise versions called Playground, and these playgrounds can actually be multi-platform as well. So you all have access to Coursera. All the generative AI courses in Coursera have Playground embedded in it. So you can use the 32,000 token ChatGPT version, or you can use Gemini. Either is available. In some courses, you'll also find Llama. And that allows you to secretly interact, and that data will not flow back into OpenAI databases which are open.
Thank you. I think that's useful. And yes, very quickly. So now we'll be having a very quick questions and answer from Dr. Barbara as well, because we've got the sign that we're running short of time now. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I have a question. Generative AI is a double-edged sword. So are there any protective factors or best practices for using AI in education?
So, no. And I'm a little flippant there, but we are on the cutting edge of really new revolution. And the only way that I really see at present to make sure that students are really learning something and not just inputting whatever they got off of ChatGPT is to proctor them, have them perform right in front of you where you can see.
Yeah, like ma'am, you showed a graph where the intelligence, it has declined over the years. So isn't ChatGPT, or sorry, generative AI, is it going to do something like that? Is there a challenge lying somewhere?
Remember that decline, at least in my opinion, considered opinion, looking at the history of what happened, occurred because we had psychologists and educators saying, you don't need to be teaching that anymore. You don't need to be making your students learn this. In some sense, they were crippling educators who were trying to do the right thing. So if you as educators learn from that experience to continue to teach well as you are teaching now, to making sure that they really get this information in long-term memory, it's not ChatGPT that's the evil. It was those who, with all good conscience, were recommending really bad things in education. That's where the problem arose, and we can learn from that and not make
repeat
the same mistake.
Thank you so much. Let's go ahead with the next question. Yes, please. And Dr. Suman will come to you after.
Yeah, good afternoon, ma'am. It's a nice session. I have one small doubt. Recently, I was explaining to my students. So there was a problem. through experience we learn something which we do not put into web, probably in the website or in a cloud. So out of experience we were teaching an event that happened at some laboratory, and when student has gone with a chat GPT or something Gemini, so it gave a random answer, and the student was like, how could this happen when my chat GPT is saying this, which my practical experience says that it
So
had
there's a
happened.
fight now, Dr. Barbara.
So no, it was very tough. Each time I come out with an experiential learning, and through experience I come out. Basically, I came from industry, and now I am into academia. So some industry things cannot be put into academy. As a result, when we discourse that content to the student in a practical way to understand, to make them understand, now due to the availability at their feet, everything, so this chat GPT is giving an answer which breaks through from academy, which comes through from academy, which does not align with the industry actually. So that is really, it's a mess with the student and faculty. I cannot go on against to him, neither he cannot come against to me. So how do I encounter this challenge?
This is such a great question. Okay, I want to talk about the history of Alzheimer's research. What happened was some 35 years ago, a paper was published that said amyloid plaques are the cause of Alzheimer's. There's some evidence that's originated that was actually, they may have faked the data in that paper. But this whole kind of wave arose so that everybody thought it was amyloid plaques. So, if you were asked to be on a research panel, you were only asked if you believed that amyloid plaques were, the ones your papers were only accepted in journals if you supported amyloid plaques. You only got funding if you were amyloid plaque fan. All the body of research literature for 30 years was that amyloid plaques were the cause of Alzheimer's. So if you went to ChatGPT and asked it, what's the cause of Alzheimer's? What you're going to get back is it's amyloid plaques, because that's the whole body of research. It's wrong. It's completely wrong. And now they're finally discovering, wait a minute, all these papers we rejected with different ideas, there were some good ideas in some of them. So ChatGPT can only reflect what's in the body of literature or what's out there on the web, and it may or may not be right. So you are so right. Your automatic system, your experiential system has informed you in a way that academia simply can't, even approach that. And that is why it is so valuable that JAIN University has hired you to help bring your experiential expertise in along with the academic, which does help in some circumstances.
Thank you. One last question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for your wonderful presentation, ma'am, and the opportunity to JAIN University. I did what you did for the Japanese before coming to this session. So I looked up onto your research, and then I come from a creative field. So we believe that design does better if done collaboratively. However, whether it is done synchronously or asynchronously, could you throw some light whether that helps creativity?
So there is one major research paper published in Nature that found that truly innovative breakthroughs in science and technology occur because of 1, 2, or 3 researchers, not more. Large groups of researchers collaborating together advance conventional science, but the breakthroughs are generally made by individuals. But what this means is if you get individuals with varying backgrounds, you have a better chance of finding those breakthroughs.
Students coming from varying backgrounds.
Thank you. Sure, please go ahead.
We are almost more than 1 billion people here and more than 2 billion devices. And one Google search has a picojoule of energy consumption. And one ChatGPT search has 15 times more approximately. So I'm just bothered about the implications, thinking critically.
I have 2 words for you: quantum computing.
I think that was very beautifully answered. Dr. Barbara, at JAIN University, we believe in education which is liberal. So we believe in beyond boundaries of disciplines. We also feel that there are barriers in the mind which are, we are constantly working towards removing those so that the spirit of liberal education is truly realized. We also believe that learning is about loving. So we want our students to love what they do, and it makes them happier, it makes us productive. So that's the journey we go through. And we also believe in creating a legacy through our learning. And you have been so beautifully instrumental in sharing such beautiful insights on not just generative artificial intelligence, not just lifelong learning, but just to be happy and joyful. And we cannot thank you enough for this. So it's been truly a pleasure for all of us here. I mean, we should give her a huge round of applause. The excitement that you demonstrate and the childlike qualities of showing us every small thing, I think we're all infected today with a very beautiful thought process. So thank you so much for being with us. May I request Ms. Aparna Prasad to felicitate our guest and share with us what you really mean to us, Dr. Barbara. And thank you, Coursera team, Prashasti, Malav, Vidushi, all of you for helping us and creating this beautiful occasion. And we look forward to hosting Dr. Barbara for a little longer time in India. And thank you so much. So that was natural intelligence. Oh, okay. Thank you so much. We appreciate the talk. And leave it here. Just free your hands. Thank you. But I have just one question in closing. No, it's okay. Do you hear me?
Here's the mic. Here's the mic.
So it's Dr. Barbara Oakley from Oakland University. So the Oakley and Oakland University, if you fed it into Suno and you had a chat with Claude, what would you hear?
That is a completely out of the blue question. So what you would hear is that my last name of Oakley is the wonderful last name that I acquired when I married my husband 40 years ago. And I had to go to the ends of the earth to meet that man. So I am very, very lucky indeed to have the Oakley name and to be working at Oakland University in Oakland Township, Michigan. And I'm very, very fortunate to be able to share with you today. So thank you so much for having me.